What happens when a child silently begs for help in a crowded park? When retired Marine Master Sergeant James Carter noticed her discreet hand signal, his combat instincts activated instantly. The difference between freedom and captivity? Someone actually paying attention. The morning sun filtered through the trees as retired Master Sergeant James Carter maintained his steady pace along the park trail. His powerful strides matched those of Captain Mike Sullivan, his former commanding officer and longtime friend since their first deployment to Fallujah. Their morning runs had become a post-military ritual, a way to maintain discipline while adjusting to civilian life. Getting slow in retirement, Master Sergeant? Mike teased, barely breaking a sweat despite the punishing pace. James smirked, his dark skin glistening in the morning light. Just conserving energy, sir. Some habits die hard. 15 years in the Marine Corps had forged them into brothers. James' reconnaissance training and Mike's leadership had saved their unit multiple times during 3 combat tours. Now back home, they carried invisible medals. The hypervigilance, the strategic awareness, the constant scanning for threats that civilian life rarely presented. James' eyes continuously swept the park, an unconscious habit from years of patrol. Children played on swings, couples walked hand in hand, and joggers navigated the winding paths. His gaze briefly connected with other veterans, recognizable by their posture, their awareness, the subtle nod of mutual recognition. Misses sometimes? Mike asked, noticing James' scan. The Corps? Every day. James replied, touching the USMC emblem tattooed on his forearm. Not the combat, but the purpose. Little did they know, purpose was about to find them again. James noticed her first, a young black girl, perhaps 9 or 10, sitting unnaturally still on a bench. Her yellow dress contrasted with her rigid posture. Beside her sat a large man in sunglasses, newspaper open, posture casual but vigilant. Something felt wrong. 3 o'clock, James muttered, using military shorthand. Mike registered immediately, his stride unbroken. I see it. James' combat assessment kicked in automatically. Unrelated pair. Child showing fear indicators. Adult displaying predatory vigilance. When the girl's eyes met James, recognition flickered across her face. Something about his military bearing, perhaps. Then her small hand curled into a fist, thumb tucked inside her palm. James' heart rate spiked. That universal gesture, the silent SOS taught to children to signal danger without alerting captors, was unmistakable. She just gave a distress signal. James said, his voice low but urgent. The one from those trafficking awareness briefings we gave. Mike nodded grimly. Hostage situation. In an instant, their morning run transformed into a tactical operation. Years of Marine training had taught them to identify threats most civilians would miss. And behind the normalcy of man and child in the park, they recognized the profile of a predator. Maintain visual, approach with caution, James said quietly, slipping effortlessly into operation mode. Rules of engagement? Non-engagement unless child safety at risk. Mike nodded. Their casual jog continued unbroken, but their purpose had changed completely. The man suddenly folded his newspaper and grabbed the girl's wrist. Firm enough to control, gentle enough to avoid public concern. Her face remained expressionless, but her eyes darted to James one last time as the man pulled her to her feet. They gave the pair 30 meters before following. James noticed how the man checked his surroundings, not casually, but systematically, scanning for threats in a 3-second cycle. Another red flag. He's moving with purpose, James observed, keeping his voice conversational though his eyes tracked every movement. Tactical retreat, not casual departure. Mike moved slightly left, creating distance between them, a flanking position that gave better observation angles without clustering. The unspoken coordination came from years of working in sync under pressure. He's heading for the east exit, Mike noted. Bus stop there. James quickly calculated options. If they board, we follow. Public transport means witnesses. Better than letting them reach a vehicle. The man moved faster now, the girl struggling to keep pace. James filed away details. The man's build, clothing, distinguishing features, the girl's controlled fear, the absence of family resemblance. building a tactical picture that would help identify threats and opportunities. Their training had taught them patience. Rushing would spook the suspect. Timing would be everything. The city bus arrived with a hydraulic hiss. The man pushed the girl aboard first, his hand never leaving her shoulder as he guided her to the back. James and Mike exchanged a brief glance, confirmation without words, then boarded separately, dropping exact change with practiced efficiency. James took a seat midway, angled to maintain surveillance while appearing disinterested. Mike positioned himself closer to the front, creating a tactical triangle. The bus was half full, enough witnesses for safety, not crowded enough to limit movement. The girl sat rigid against a window, her fingers laced tightly together. The man's posture remained alert, his arm draped possessively across the seat behind her. This wasn't parental protection. It was containment. Mike casually rose, pretending to adjust a position as the bus swayed. He moved toward the back, stopping near their row. "That's a cool bracelet," he said to the girl, his voice friendly. "My daughter has one just like it." The girl's eyes widened slightly. The man's fingers tightened on her shoulder. "She doesn't like talking to strangers," the man said, voice carefully modulated. "We've had a long day." Mike nodded pleasantly, but James caught his subtle hand position, the Marine signal for confirmed threat. As Mike returned to his seat, James noted how the girl's breathing had changed, shallow, controlled, attempting to suppress emotion. "Next stop," James murmured, knowing Mike would hear. Their window for action was narrowing. The bus slowed, and the man immediately stood, pulling the girl up before the doors fully opened. The man led the girl into an increasingly deserted neighborhood. With each turn, the streets grew narrower and emptier, a tactical choice to eliminate witnesses. When they turned into a dim alley between abandoned storefronts, James knew they had to act. The man suddenly stopped, pivoting to face them. His calculated stance betrayed combat training. "You two following us?" he asked, voice deceptively calm. James stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Mike. His body language remained deliberately non-threatening, while keeping the girl in his peripheral vision. "Just making sure everything's all right," James replied, his deep voice steady. The young lady seemed uncomfortable. The man snorted, hand tightening on the girl's arm. "My niece is fine. She's just shy. Not everyone needs a babysitter." "That right?" Mike asked, addressing the girl directly. "Is this your uncle, sweetheart?" The man cut in before she could answer. "Look, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but we're heading home. Mind your business." James noticed a calculated shift in the man's weight, preparation for either fight or flight. His eyes flicked toward the deeper shadows of the alley. "Just one question," James said, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "Is this man really your uncle?" The girl's lower lip trembled. She looked at James, really looked at him, noting his steady gaze, his controlled posture, his silent promise of protection. "No," she whispered. The word had barely left her lips when two more men emerged from the shadows. One was muscular with a scraped knuckle tattoo. The other was leaner, hand hovering near his waistband. "Problem here?" the larger one asked. The man holding the girl smirked. "Just some nosy vets playing hero." James felt Mike shift behind him, taking a defensive position. They'd walked into an ambush. But as any Marine knew, sometimes the best plan was to spring the trap. "Last chance," James said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd faced worse odds in Fallujah. "Let the girl go." The first man's face hardened. "You made a mistake, jarhead." James moved the instant he reached for the girl again. 15 years of combat training unleashing in one fluid motion. His hand locked around the man's wrist, applying precise pressure to the radial nerve. The man gasped, his grip on the girl releasing involuntarily. "Run to Mike," James commanded. The girl darted behind Mike as the larger thug charged. Mike sidestepped with surprising agility for his size, using the man's momentum to slam him into the alley wall with a Marine Corps takedown. The third man pulled a knife, slashing wildly at James. James recognized the undisciplined movement of a street fighter, dangerous but predictable. He blocked the strike with his forearm, closing distance to neutralize the weapon's advantage, then delivered a devastating elbow strike to the attacker's solar plexus. The knife clattered to ground as the man doubled over. The first man recovered, reaching inside his jacket. James recognized the motion, weapon draw. In combat, hesitation meant death. James delivered a precise strike to the man's wrist, following with a palm heel to the sternum that sent him stumbling backward. A gun skittered across the pavement. Mike efficiently controlled his opponent with a submission Hold learned in Marine Corps martial arts training. James, behind you. James spun to find the knife wielder recovering, now holding a second blade. Before the man could strike, James executed a perfect sweep kick, taking the attacker's legs from under him. The girl watched wide-eyed as the men who had terrified her were systematically neutralized by disciplined precision rather than wild aggression. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police, but the Marines had already won the battle. Blue and red lights flooded the alley as police cruisers blocked both exits. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, shouting commands. Police, hands up, everyone down. James and Mike complied immediately, Marine discipline evident in their controlled movements. The three attackers, already subdued, were quickly handcuffed by officers. A detective approached, eyeing James suspiciously. You two want to explain what's happening here? Before James could answer, another officer cut in. Careful, looks like gang activity. His eyes lingered on James' dark skin and muscular build. Master Sergeant James Carter, United States Marine Corps, retired. James stated calmly, Captain Sullivan and I witnessed this child using the distress signal in the park. We followed to confirm she was in danger. The detective glanced between them, skepticism evident. Check their IDs, he ordered a subordinate. Mike stepped forward. That girl is being trafficked. These men were taking her somewhere. We intervened when she confirmed she didn't know them. The girl, still trembling, nodded vigorously from beside a female officer. When the junior officer returned with their military IDs, the detective's demeanor shifted subtly. Retired Marines, huh? That explains the professional takedowns. For the first time since their intervention began, James felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. The detective studied his tablet, expression darkening. We've got multiple flags on these suspects. Part of a trafficking network we've been tracking for months. He glanced up at James and Mike. That distress signal the girl gave you, we've been training children to use it in schools. We know, James said, Marines participate in community safety programs. That's how we recognized it. The detective nodded slowly, newfound respect evident. The Marine Corps teaches you to spot danger others miss. Combat zones or city parks. Threats of patterns, James explained. The controlled fear, the isolation techniques, the tactical awareness of the captor, textbook predatory behavior. The girl sat wrapped in a shock blanket, watched over by a female officer. Her eyes hadn't left James since the police arrived. We've had 7 similar abductions in 3 months, the detective continued. Different perpetrators, same methods, same network. You just helped us crack a case we've been building. Mike crossed his arms. They had backup nearby. This wasn't random. No, the detective agreed. It wasn't. We found communications on their phones. They were delivering her to a secondary location. If you hadn't intervened, he left the sentence unfinished. James looked toward the girl, her small frame swallowed by the police blanket. What appeared to civilians as a man, and his niece had been something far darker, a predator and prey. His military training had allowed him to see past the disguise, to recognize the tactical situations civilians missed. Sometimes the most dangerous battlefields were hiding in plain sight. Once the suspect were secured in police vehicles, James approached the girl, crouching to meet her eye level, the same way he'd approached frightened children in war zones. Hey there, he said gently. You're safe now. You were really brave today. She looked up, her eyes still wide but no longer vacant with fear. You saw me, she whispered. Nobody else saw me. I was trained to notice things others miss, James explained. That hand signal you made was perfect. You saved yourself today. A tear slid down her cheek. Are you really a Marine? James smiled, extending his wrist to show his USMC tattoo. Master Sergeant James Carter at your service. She reached out hesitantly, touching the emblem with small fingers. My grandpa was a Marine too. He told me Marines always help people. Something tightened in James' chest. Pride mingled with purpose. Since leaving active duty, he'd struggled with the transition, missing the clear mission, the undeniable purpose of service. But today I'd reminded him, you could remove the Marine from the combat zone, but never remove the Marine's instinct to protect. Your grandpa was right, James said, and you know what? You showed Marine courage today. Semper Fi, little warrior. 2 weeks later, James and Mike jogged the same park route, hyper-aware of the bench where they'd first noticed a girl. The case had made local headlines. Retired Marines disrupt trafficking ring. 3 more arrests had followed as the network unraveled. Detective called yesterday, Mike said between measured breaths. The girl's back with her family. They've got enough evidence to put those guys away for decades. James nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. Good. Also, said the department wants veterans for their community safety program, teaching observation skills, situational awareness. They rounded a corner, and James slowed. Ahead stood the girl, holding her mother's hand. She looked different now. Shoulders relaxed, eyes bright, a small smile replacing her former massive fear. Mr. James. Mr. Mike, she called, waving excitedly. They approached, and the girl's mother extended her hand. I wanted to thank you, she said, voice thick with emotion. If you hadn't noticed her signal. James shook his head. Your daughter saved herself. She was brave enough to signal when she had the chance. The girl beamed. I'm taking self-defense classes now, and Mom's helping me teach other kids the hand signal at school. Mike grinned, future Marine in training. As they continued their run, James felt something shift inside him. The same clarity of purpose he'd known in uniform. The battlefield had changed, but the mission remained. Protect the vulnerable, serve with honor, remain vigilant. You thinking what I'm thinking? Mike asked. James nodded. Someone needs to teach these kids what to watch for. The Corps had taught them to identify threats. Now it was time to pass that knowledge on. When a child signals for help, would you notice? These Marines did, and they saved a life through their training and courage. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories of everyday heroes making a difference when it matters most.